You will hear a number of different recordings, and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. Write all your answers in the listening question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1 on page 2 of your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear a woman who wants to rent a vacation cottage telephoning the owner. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Oh, hello. I'm calling about a vacation rental. The name I've been given is Carol Marriott.
I'm Dave, Carol's husband. We own it together.
The joint owners of the cottage are Carol Marriott and her husband Dave, so Dave has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 7.
Hello?
Oh, hello. I'm calling about a vacation rental. The name I've been given is Carol Marriott.
I'm Dave, Carol's husband. We own it together.
Oh, right. Well, some friends of ours rented Astor Cottage from you for a week by the ocean last summer, and they recommended it to us. My husband and I would like to rent it in the fall for a week.
Okay. When exactly?
We're looking at the week beginning September 21st, if it's available.
Let me check. No, I'm sorry. It's already booked that week. You could have it the previous week from the 14th.
Well, we could manage that week if we change a couple of arrangements. How much would it cost?
That would be $835.
Ah, that's rather more than we wanted to pay, I'm afraid. We were hoping to pay closer to $790, which our friends paid last year.
We also have a slightly smaller cottage called Periwinkle Cottage.
Excuse me? How do you spell the name?
Periwinkle. Periwinkle. It's available the week you want it, and it's the exact same price that your friends paid last year. I take it you want a place that sleeps just 2 people, like Astor Cottage?
Yes. Is it near Astor Cottage?
Yeah, it's right across the street.
And what's this cottage like?
Well, it's part of a historic building that was originally a school 100 years ago. It was converted into a post office around 1950. Then, later on, the post office moved, and the building was divided to make 2 cottages.
So, is it on several floors?
No, it's all on one floor. There's a large living room, a kitchen that's really well equipped, a bedroom, and a bathroom with a tub and a shower.
Oh, very nice.
From the living room, you can go out onto the deck, which is a great place to have your meals when the weather's nice.
That sounds fantastic. Can you see the river that flows through the town from the cottage?
You sure can. It's close by. You can see it from the bedroom.
Okay. Would we need to bring anything? Bedding, say?
That's provided. But we make a small charge for towels, unless you bring your own, of course.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. Because we'll be driving, There'll be plenty of room in the car for things like that. Oh, that reminds me. Is there a garage that we can use?
I'm afraid there isn't one. But you can usually get a parking spot on the street right in front of the cottage.
No problem. We probably won't use the car much while we're there anyway. We like to go for walks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10 on page 2. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Oh, and what about the town itself? Are there any restaurants in the neighborhood?
There are a few, all within walking distance. A lot of people like the fish restaurant, but in my opinion, the Chinese restaurant has got to be the best for miles around.
That's good to know. We might end up eating out every evening.
Well, why not?
Our friend said the town is pretty famous for antique stores.
That's right. There's a whole bunch of them, at least 10 on the main street.
Marvelous. Okay, I'd like to make the booking, please.
Great. We ask for a deposit of $200 and final payment at least 6 weeks before your stay. But we'll be away ourselves for much of August, so let's say no later than the last day of July. Is that okay with you?
Fine.
Okay. Then let me give you our details so you can send the deposit.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2 on page 3.
Section 2. You will hear a company manager talking to staff about procedures to follow if a fire breaks out at work. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14 on page 3. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello, and thanks to everyone for being on time. The meeting will be fairly short and we'll only be looking at fire procedures. I had a similar meeting with the senior fire officers earlier today, but you're all here because you've volunteered to act as fire wardens for your own particular department. And for some of you, this will be your first time in the role. Although you'll probably have taken part in several fire drills since you've been here. But now the construction work is finished and we have a couple of new corridors and stairways, we need the meeting to update everyone. And before I forget, you might have noticed a bit of upgrading last week. The handheld fire extinguishers, the standard ones on the wall, the report says they're all working well, as is the overhead sprinkler system. But the old alarm system has been replaced and should be a lot more reliable. Anyway, as fire wardens, you have a number of responsibilities. Okay, those wardens responsible for the factory buildings, you'll remember we had a minor fire back in January. Luckily, the fire doors around the room stopped most of the smoke from getting out, but the alarm should have been pressed a lot earlier. From what I understand, staff felt somewhat reluctant to activate it themselves and were looking for someone senior. So please ensure that everyone knows it's their responsibility to take action immediately. Can you also make sure that if anyone new has been hired since then, that they've read the fire notices? And wardens for office departments, you'll also have to have a word with your staff. When the fire alarm went off in January in that minor fire, people got out of the office building pretty quickly. That was fine, but once they were out, they stood right in front of the doors. So if the fire crews had needed to access the offices, they would have been prevented. Good to see that everyone had left their bags and stuff behind, though.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20 on page 4. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Okay, next on the agenda. There's a few aspects of fire safety that we need to go through with all you wardens. Firstly, we want to make sure that when we have the next fire drill, there's nothing blocking the way in the escape routes. No obstacles, I mean. So please have a look at that as soon as possible. We want to be able to get outside very quickly. One thing that should definitely be on your to-do list is making sure no one's locked the fire doors and that it's easy enough to get through them. Now, you might remember that last year we had a fire officer come and visit and show us what to do if we see a colleague starting to suffer from the effects of smoke inhalation. Well, the same officer's coming back to lead another session. Another issue is how to handle the fire extinguishers. Someone from the local fire department is booked in to teach people how to do that. I think it would be a good idea if fire wardens and department staff attended those sessions. Let's see, what else is on the list? Oh yes, the evacuation points. The green area behind the main car park, the pavement on Hunter Street, and the unused area behind the factory car park. Fire wardens need to make sure all staff are familiar with these locations for evacuation, so please send out emails directly after the meeting. And the last point is to do with flammable liquids. I believe there have been a few concerns about where they were being stored in the warehouse, but that's been resolved now. However, if anyone has anything else to report, do let me know.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3 on page 5.
Section 3. You will hear a textile design student called Jim discussing his project on using natural dyes for colouring fabrics with his tutor. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
OK, Jim, you wanted to see me about your textile design project.
That's right. I've been looking at how a range of natural dyes can be used to colour fabrics like cotton and wool.
Why did you choose that topic?
Well, I got a lot of useful ideas from the museum, you know, at that exhibition of textiles. But I've always been interested in anything to do with colour. Years ago, I went to a carpet shop with my parents when we were on holiday in Turkey, and I remember all the amazing colours.
They might not all have been natural dyes.
Maybe not, but for the project, I decided to follow it up. And I found a great book about a botanic garden in California that specialises in plants used for dyes.
OK, so in your project, you had to include a practical investigation.
Yeah. At first I couldn't decide on my variables. I was going to just look at one type of fibre, for example, like cotton.
And see how different types of dyes affected it?
Yes. Then I decided to include others as well. So I looked at cotton and wool and nylon.
With just one type of dye?
Various types, including some that weren't natural, for comparison.
OK.
So I did the experiments last week. I used some ready-made natural dyes. I found a website which supplied them. They came in just a few days, but I also made some of my own.
That must have taken quite a bit of time.
Yes. I thought it'd just be a matter of a teaspoon or so of dye, and actually that wasn't the case at all. Like, I was using one vegetable, a beetroot, for a red dye, and I had to chop up a whole pile of it. So it all took longer than I'd expected.
One possibility is to use food colourings.
I did use one. That was a yellow dye, an artificial one.
Tartrazine?
Yeah, I used it on cotton first. It came out a great colour. But when I rinsed the material, the colour just washed away. I'd been going to try it out on nylon, but I abandoned that idea.
Were you worried about health issues?
I thought if it's a legal food colouring, it must be safe.
Well, it can occasionally cause allergic reactions, I believe.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
So what natural dyes did you look at?
Well, one was turmeric. The colour's great. It's a really strong yellow. It's generally used in dishes like curry.
It's meant to be quite good for your health when eaten, but you might find it's not permanent when it's used as a dye. A few washes and it's gone.
Right. I used beetroot as a dye for wool. When I chop up beetroot to eat, I always end up with bright red hands. But the wool ended up just a sort of watery cream shade. Disappointing.
There's a natural dye called Tyrian purple. Have you heard of that?
Yes. It comes from a shellfish, and it was worn in ancient times, but only by important people, as it was so rare. I didn't use it.
It fell out of use centuries ago, though one researcher managed to get hold of some recently. But that shade of purple can be produced by chemical dyes nowadays. Did you use any black dyes?
Logwood. That was quite complicated. I had to prepare the fabric so the dye would take.
I hope you were careful to wear gloves.
Yes, I know the danger with that dye.
Good, it can be extremely dangerous if it's ingested. Now, presumably you had a look at an insect-based dye, like cochineal, for example.
Yes, I didn't actually make that. I didn't have time to start crushing up insects to get the red colour, and anyway, they're not available here. But I managed to get the dye quite easily from a website, but it cost a fortune. I can see why it's generally just used in cooking and in small quantities.
Yes, it's very effective, but that's precisely why it's not used as a dye.
I also read about using metal oxide. Apparently you can allow iron to rust while it's in contact with the fabric, and that colours it.
Yes, that works well for dyeing cotton. But you have to be careful as the metal can actually affect the fabric, and so you can't expect to get a lot of wear out of fabrics treated in this way. And the colours are quite subtle. Not everyone likes them. Anyway, it looks as if you've done a lot of work.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4.
Part 4. You will hear a presentation by a food science student about the production of maple syrup. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to look at another natural food product, and that's maple syrup. What is this exactly? Well, maple syrup looks rather like clear honey, but it's not made by bees. It's produced from the plant fluid, or sap, inside the maple tree, and that makes maple syrup a very natural product. Maple syrup is a thick, golden, sweet-tasting liquid that can be bought in bottles or jars and poured onto foods such as waffles and ice cream, or used in the baking of cakes and pastries. It contains no preservatives or added ingredients, and it provides a healthy alternative to refined sugar. Let's just talk a bit about the maple tree itself, which is where maple syrup comes from. So, there are many species of maple tree, and they'll grow without fertilizer in areas where there's plenty of moisture in the soil. However, they'll only do this if another important criterion is fulfilled, which is that they must have full or partial sun exposure during the day and very cool nights. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. There are only certain parts of the world that provide all these conditions. One is Canada, and by that I mean all parts of Canada. And the other is the northeastern states of North America. In these areas, the climate suits the trees perfectly. In fact, Canada produces over 2/3 of the world's maple syrup, which is why the 5-pointed maple leaf is a Canadian symbol and has featured on the flag since 1964. So, how did maple syrup production begin? Well, long before Europeans settled in these parts of the world, the indigenous communities had started producing maple sugar. They bored holes in the trunks of maple trees and used containers made of tree bark to collect the liquid sap as it poured out. As they were unable to keep the liquid for any length of time, they didn't have storage facilities in those days. They boiled the liquid by placing pieces of rock that had become scorching hot from the sun into the sap. They did this until it turned into sugar, and they were then able to use this to sweeten their food and drinks. Since that time, improvements have been made to the process, but it has changed very little overall. So, let's look at the production of maple syrup today. Clearly, the maple forests are a valuable resource in many Canadian and North American communities. The trees have to be well looked after, and they cannot be used to make syrup until the trunks reach a diameter of around 25 centimeters. This can take anything up to 40 years. As I've already mentioned, maple trees need the right conditions to grow and also to produce sap. Why is this? Well, what happens is that during a cold night, the tree absorbs water from the soil, and that rises through the tree's vascular system. But then, in the warmer daytime, the change in temperature causes the water to be pushed back down to the bottom of the tree. This continual movement, up and down, leads to the formation of the sap needed for maple syrup production. When the tree is ready, it can be tapped, and this involves drilling a small hole into the trunk and inserting a tube into it that ends in a bucket. The trees can often take several taps, though the workers take care not to cause any damage to the healthy growth of the tree itself. The sap that comes out of the trees consists of 98% water and 2% sugar and other nutrients. It has to be boiled so that much of that water evaporates, and this process has to take place immediately using what are called evaporators. These are basically extremely large pans. The sap is poured into these. A fire is built, and the pans are then heated until the sap boils. As it does this, the water evaporates and the syrup begins to form. The evaporation process creates large quantities of steam, and the sap becomes thicker and denser, and at just the right moment, when the sap is thick enough to be called maple syrup, the worker removes it from the heat. After this process, something called sugar sand has to be filtered out, as this builds up during the boiling and gives the syrup a cloudy appearance and a slightly gritty taste. Once this has been done, the syrup is ready to be packaged so that it can be used for a whole variety of products. It takes 40 liters of sap to produce 1 liter of maple syrup, so you can get an idea of how much is needed. So that's the basic process. In places like Quebec...
That is the end of part 4.